Alright, so today I'm going to take the cam out of this thing, put the other cam in. This thing just not responding well to anything over a 200 shot of nitrous. And usually the motor cams, the low lobe separation cams, they respond better on nitrous up to like a 200 shot. And then once you go over a 200 shot, you're better off with a nitrous dedicated cam from what I've seen. But yeah, we got that 300 shot on there. Didn't seem to help anything over 200 shot of nitrous. It just wasn't picking up anything. So we're going to put an actual nitrous cam, then use that 300 shot. If that don't get us in the nines, I don't know what will. But I'm going to have to take the carburetor off, the nitrous plate, the distributor, the intake, the balancer, timing water pump, timing cover. But first thing I'm going to do is I just put antifreeze in this thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is drain the coolant out and catch what I can in a 5-gallon bucket. Or I think I got a little 2.5-gallon bucket in there. We'll try that. That should be plenty. But yeah, that's what we're going to do today. Get this thing to run nines next season for sure. Hopefully. I'm just draining the coolant right there at the bottom hose. I don't know if that one had a drain line on the radiator or not, but anyway. Just draining it from the bottom hose. Then I'm going to take the carburetor off, which I'll have to take this fuel rail off and these 4 bolts. And that'll lift right up. And then you got to take the carburetor linkage off too. Over here, which this one's made with the linkage on the bolts. Sometimes the linkage is on the intake, but yeah. But I will have to take this off. So that's what I'm going to do next. Alright, got all 4 bolts out. Got the linkage out. Got that down here. Took the nitrous line off. Took the solenoid off of the base plate, the front and back. Now that should lift straight up, nitrous plate and all, with the gaskets. Make sure you unhook your brake booster line as well, or any vacuum lines. They go to the carburetor. That's the only vacuum line that we have going to the carburetor right there is for the brake booster. Which with that big of a cam, it doesn't work that good anyway. But we had one of them vacuum canisters on there, and that did help, honestly. But it's kind of heavy, so we just took it off. And just like that, carburetor's off. I'll pull that gasket off too, and then I'm going to pull the distributor next. Alright, take the distributor out. Take that bolt out right there. And it's usually on the other side. This intake had a bolt hole for each side. Not all of them do that. Most of the time it's on the other side. But you got a vacuum canister on most of the distributors that come in these small block Chevys, and then all the wiring runs over there. It's hard to get in there. So we put it on this side. But you take that bolt out, and just take all the spark plug wires out, and you just pull it straight out. Because we're going to have to retime it and everything after the cam and everything like that. And we'll go over all that, and I'll show you how to get it on the #1 cylinder based on the timing marks. A lot of people think dot to dot is cylinder #1, and then they try to strap their distributor, and then they wonder why they're 180 degrees out. Because when you're dot to dot on the timing cover, and we'll go over this a little bit more on the timing chain. When you're dot to dot on the timing chain, and we'll go over this a little bit more later, but that's cylinder number 6. It's 18436572. So dot to dot is actually firing number 6. You want the dots both at the 12 o'clock position on the cam gear and the timing gear, or on the crank gear and the timing gear, for it to be on cylinder 1. And that's where you want to stab your distributor out. So after I put the cam and everything in, I do dot to dot, just because it's easier to line them up, and then I'll turn the motor over counterclock position. Then I put everything back together. Then I stab it my distributor with the rotor pointing at number 1. But let's go ahead and get this distributor out, and then I want to go ahead and get the intake off. We're going to send the intake off to Boyd Elliott, and I'll show you why in a minute. You probably can't see down in there. Let's shine some light down in there. Well, no, the light's on. But the intake runners are smaller than the head runners, so you need to match those up. Plus, you know, port this out a little bit, smooth it up, and that'll definitely help us, because that ledge from the intake runner to the head runner, it's just, that's definitely going to cause some flow issues. But getting a little sidetracked, getting a little bit further than what we are. Let's go ahead and take the distributor out next. Oh, also something Christopher did on his car that really helps is he marked the plug wires up here, so that's going to help, especially if your plug wires run all the way down through the bottom like that. He's also marked them on here, but you have to pull the fire protectant sleeve back to see it, but he's marked them down there as well. But I'm not even going to take those off. I'm going to do this in a way to where we won't even have to take the spark plugs out, and then I can just disconnect them from up here, and I know what they are because he's marked them for when we put them back on the cap. Now, if your plug wires run across the top of the valve cover and then go down, which I like the best, you really don't have to worry about that, because you know which plug wire goes where. But I don't know if you can see that cluster of wires down there going down through the bottom. It's hard to tell which one's which, so it's a lot easier if you mark them up here. Also, you can take the cap off and just pull the distributor out and leave the plug wires on the cap, but like I said, the plug wires are marked up here, so I don't have to worry about that so much. But I mean, if they're not marked and they go down there, you might want to mark them before you take them off the distributor, or just take the cap off and just leave the cap with the spark plug wires still on it, and then just take the distributor out. And the cap's easy to take off. Most of them are just like a little spring, little clip. You push down with a screwdriver and you turn, and the clip comes off the bottom. You do that on both sides. This one, it had the clips. I took the clips off and I put the screw in top, so those screw in. They're actually kind of long screws, and they're Allen, so it's just easier for me to take off the spark plug wires. And again, they're marked, so that's just the easiest way for me to do it with this setup. Then also, before you pull it out of there, there are some wires connected to it. This one right here just has the one wire that goes to the ignition box. So I just have to unplug that one and it comes out. Now the HEIs, they have a set of plug wires that just plug in right here. You just unplug those. But yeah, unplug that, pull it right out. There you go, distributor's out. It's always a good idea to take a look at this gear, make sure everything looks good with it. It looks brand new. And then we'll yeah, that looks brand new. Well, it's got a little bit of wear right there, but usually when you do a cam, it's usually best to replace that gear, and we'll probably do that. And it's easy to replace. You just knock that pin out, it slides off, and you slide it back on. Now you do have to keep in mind that the diameter on the bottom where it slides up on the shaft is a little bit different from HEI and aftermarket. I forget what the numbers are, but see, cam turns that gear, which turns the distributor, fires your spark plug wires and your spark plugs, and that right there turns your oil pump. You got an oil pump shaft down in there. It turns the oil pump through that. But yeah, let's go ahead and take these intake bolts out. Anytime I take these bolts out for the carburetor or anything, I like to loosen, just barely loosen them. And then like on the carburetor, I barely loosen that one, barely loosen that one, barely loosen that one, barely loosen that one, then I'll loosen them all. And I'll do the same thing on the intake. I'll start here, barely loosen there, barely loosen there, barely loosen there, and then go to the outer edges there, 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 there. It's kind of like a crisscross pattern. Make sure you don't warp anything. But yeah, so to take the intake off, really all we got to do is take the water, the radiator hose off, and then take those bolts out and move our wires out of the way. That should come right out, and that's next. So again, going to loosen those. My crisscross prattler, starting here, go over there, over there, over there, and then we'll go over there, over there, over there, over there. Then we'll go here, 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 here. Take them all out. This is a small block Chevy, so it's got 6 on each side for a total of 12. The Vortex head small block Chevys, I think they've only got 8. 2 in each corner. I don't think they use these middle ones. Been a long time since I messed with a Vortex head motor though. But yeah, we'll get the intake off next. Also, you got a gasket right here. Make sure that don't stay on the intake. And make sure it don't fall down in the intake hole. It could fall down in your oil pan if you're unlucky enough. So yeah, make sure the distributor gasket. Alright, took all the bolts out just like I said I was going to do. That little pattern thing I said. I went in the trunk and unhooked the battery. I unhooked all the wires to the back of the alternator so I can move everything over here. So I got everything moved out of the way. Make sure you don't have no vacuum hoses or heater hoses or radiator hoses or anything else like that. Those hoses just run up to here to help cool the rear cylinders. Usually these coolant passages dead end. On this intake you can run them back up to the gooseneck here. And I'm going to take that radiator hose off. And usually these are kind of stuck on the cylinder, on the china wall. So what I usually do is stick a screwdriver in here, right in there. Be careful not to nick on anything, and kind of pry up on it. And I'll do that on both sides. I don't know if I've got a good, yeah, the tips broke off that one. That's why that one's not getting in there. Let's try this one with a better tip right here. There you go. Just like that. So now it should pull right up. But we gotta take this hose off. So I'll go ahead and take that hose off and we'll lift that off there. There we go. And then it takes off. And I'll show you why we wanted to port it. See how the intake gasket matches perfectly up to the head runner? See if we can get a gasket off them. Also, it looks like this was leaking. Look, there's wetness right in the middle. That's not good. And you know what? We did have problems with this thing bogging down on tip end ever since I overheated it. So hopefully we'll probably run a thicker gasket next time. But anyway, look how much bigger that is. See? There's a big lip over that. See? And then on the head, the port's as big, if not actually over here, it's bigger. The port's bigger than the gasket. So that's why we want to port this. Plus we had a suspicion that the intake gasket was leaking too, so we'll fix that while we're in there. But look at that. Look at the difference. There's over a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch overhang. And when that, and look how rough that is. Yeah, that needs ported bad. They didn't do a very good job on that. But it's a cheap intake. I think a cheap intake ported is going to be better than a good intake non-ported. But yeah, that intake definitely needs work, and it was definitely leaking. So we'll get that ported and get a good gasket on it. I'll have to clean all that up real good. Actually, ain't that bad on the head. We'll pull this other one off. This is where I put the RTV on it for it to stick for when I set it down in there. But yeah, that gasket was definitely leaking in places it shouldn't have been leaking. I don't know if you can see this one, but it's really wet too around the ports. Look at the bottom. So yeah, that gasket, I'm thinking probably where I overheated it, it caused the leak. Probably could have, I don't know, all these bolts were tight. Might have could have cinched the bolts down a little bit more, I don't know. But anyway, it's getting a ported intake and another gasket. So that is done, and I'm going to leave the rockers down in there and everything like that, because I'm going to be needing to turn the motor over up here. And if I take the rockers and the push rods and the lifters out, then I'm going to have to take the spark plugs out to get it to turn over. So I'm just going to leave those in. I'm going to take those out last. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the belt, the alternator, the water pump off, and then the harmonic balancer. So that's next. Alright, took the alternator bolt out, took the belt off. I just pushed it out of the way. Took these two bolts, took that bracket. That'll be good enough for that. I can get to the water pump bolts here. And then this bracket here, you usually have to take it off because it'll bolt to the intake. But we cut that part off because the intake we were using, it didn't have a place for that. But yeah, you usually have to take that off. And there's a bolt there, a bolt that goes to the intake. And then there's 4 bolts for the water pump. But I'll have to take the power steering out. We was going to take that out anyway because we haven't been using it. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out now. And there's just a bolt there and a bolt there, and then you got to take these hoses off. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get that out. Take these bolts out for the water pump. There's 2 over here, 2 over there. Take the water pump bolt out, and then there's 3 bolts on this pulley up inside here. I'll take those out, and then I'll take the main crank bolt out as well, because that holds it on there as well. See, so I'll take all 4 of those bolts out, take the pulley off, and then take the video ended on me there. I accidentally hit the stop button. But yeah, take that crank bolt out, the 3 pulley bolts out, and then we'll get that harmonic balancer tool out here and take the harmonic balancer off. So I'm gonna go ahead and work on that. All right, there we go. Power steering pump's out, and we're gonna leave that out. And then just take out these 4 bolts, 2 on each side, and the water pump come out. Just make sure you undo your water hose there. It's already undone down there, so ain't no sense undoing it up here. And then we can pull that out. Alright, I put some paper towel down in the intake holes, and I put a old sheet down in there. A branch fell off of one of them trees way up there. And it went right down in the back intake port there on 5 and 7. I was able to get it out, but I will blow those out with air. But you definitely don't want nothing to get down in there. Alright, so next we're going to take off that pulley with the crank bolt and the 3 bolts that hold that on. Alright, the balancer's off. Take the 3 bolts out and the main bolt for the crank. And now we can stick our harmonic balancer puller tool in there and pull that off. Not sure if you can see because of the glare, but this is the balancer I use. It's a Proform. I forget the part number, but it works pretty good. It's got these little fittings that go on the end of here that screw into the crank hole, and that screws into the tool right here. And there's the fittings. And then you just put the right fitting on there. You screw all this in the hole. And then this piece will go on the outside. And then once we get that in there, then we just loosen this up and we can hold this part and it'll pull it. You put these 3 bolts where the puller is bolted to. And mine was the fine thread bolts, so I'll be using those. But try to get these as even as you can inside the balancer there. But, yeah, for pulling it off, you can just screw this whole thing in there once you get the fitting that fits your crank. And I'll just stick it in there. Like so. Screw it in there. Screw it in as far as you can. And then you can screw that up to it. If it's right in the hole. That's probably enough room there. Then this one goes on this way when you're pulling that flat side out. You just slide it on there. There's a bearing inside there. And then you get your 3 bolts here. They've got washers for the bolts too, but I don't really need the washers. Oh. And then screw those in. I let them bottom out. That way I know they're all even, because the more even you get these 3 bolts, the better off you're going to be. But just screw those all the way in. And then once you get them all in, you can just loosen this bolt. And if it starts to turn on you, you can put a wrench on that one. But just loosen that and it'll start pulling it off. See how it's pulling away from there? I'm gonna go ahead and get the other 2 bolts in there, start loosening that and pull it off. And sometimes them things don't come off easy. So you need a breaker bar to get them at least started, but we'll see if... We just put that one on not too long ago, so I don't think it'll be stuck. Alright, so I did have to use a breaker bar. And I just used a small crescent wrench on the end there and using the breaker bar to loosen. And it's coming off slowly but surely. The more you pull it out, the easier it starts to be. So I'll keep loosening that up with the breaker bar and holding the other one. It's just hard to do leaning over this car. When you're short and fat, your belly gets in the way, and then you're already short to begin with. So that makes, I'm already short to begin with, so that even makes it worse. But yeah, slowly but surely. All right, after a few good turns, I was able to just turn it with the crescent wrenches. If I had, I believe that's 11/16, but if I had 11/16 of deep well for my socket, I could use my little breaker bar and just put it over there on the fender like that. And that would make things a lot easier, but this breaker bar, it won't fit on the end of the crescent wrench, and I don't have a deep well socket to go over the end of that. A shallow well socket won't go up far enough. Or someone to hold that wrench for this would be a lot easier, but kid's out playing in the yard, he gets excited. He's infantile autistic. He likes to play on the trampoline. He has a good time though. Alright, we'll finish taking that off. Slowly but surely. And then I gotta go underneath there and unbolt some of the oil pan bolts. And then we can take the timing cover off. But you gotta drop the oil pan a little bit, or the timing cover where it goes around the front oil pan seal there, it kind of latches around the back of it. So you gotta drop the pan a little bit to get that timing cover off correctly. And there you go. It's off. Now we just need to unscrew this piece out of the crank to pull it all out. And there we go, it's out. I could have took these out, then took this out. But now, unloosen the oil pan bolts, take the timing cover off, timing chain then cam, we're getting there. All right, I got the timing cover off. Now, I didn't take all the oil pan bolts out. I took about 3 out on this side and 3 out on this side. Actually, I didn't even take them all the way out. I just loosened them up until they came out, and then I screwed them back in the hole just enough to where they'd stay in the hole. And I lightly put a screwdriver on one side and just knocked it in there a little bit. Be real careful not to damage that rubber gasket. But timing cover come right off. And here's why you have to do that, because this lip has to go on the other side of that oil pan. So I'll do the same thing when I put it back in, and I'll also put some RTV in these corners, but and also tighten the timing cover up, then the pan. But anyway, that's why you have to drop the oil pan, just to get that lip on the other side. And some of them even have these little flat pieces right here. But yeah, not too bad. Probably don't even need a wedge of screwdriver in there, just as long as it's loose enough to where we can put that in the groove, push down on the pan a little and slide it back. But anyway, this is a retrofit roller cam, so it has to have a cam button, and that's all measured up and good, so it shouldn't be any different when we put the other cam in there. That cam button should work, but we will check the cam in play, because he had that one set perfect. There was no if that's not set perfect, then the cam moves back and forth. When it moves back and forth, your timing jumps around a little bit, and his timing was rock steady. So, but there are little, he's got that retainer plate, so there's them tabs around the bolts, so I got to beat those tabs back with a screwdriver, pry them back so I can get the bolts out. And he also, I believe he Loctited the bolts, so hopefully they're not too hard to get off. But we'll go ahead and take that off, and there's no way, just looking, there's no way it's going to clear the radiator. So I'm going to have to move the radiator either out of the way. I might be able to just move it. I might be able to just unhook the overflow, and the transmission lines and the wire for the radiator fans, they're all over here. Maybe I can just move it over and set it over there, just get it out of the way so we can pull the cam out. But the first thing is to push those retainers back on the retaining plate, take the bolts out. Now I turn the motor over until I line them up dot to dot there. Let me take this wrench off so you can see better. Right, there you go, dot to dot. And then I'll go ahead and take the timing chain off. I done loosen the bolts. And then we move the radiator out of the way and take the cam out. And take the cam button out and set it to the side. Alright, there we go. Timing chain's off. I did have to stick a screwdriver back behind there and kind of try to pry it off the pin. It was stuck on the pin a little bit, but it's off now. And then now we got to take the rocker arms, the valve covers, the rocker arms, and the push rods out, and then that can slide out of there. So go ahead and work on that a little bit. Getting dark on me. It gets dark too early this time of year. It's depressing. But anyway, we got the rocker arms off, the push rods out, and then I just took the lifters out of the bores and set them where they go back in. And I will inspect those rollers to make sure that they are good before I put them back in. But I'm just going to go ahead and stick that sheet back down in there. Move this radiator out of the way and pull this one out. Stab the other one back in. Making progress. Well, I pulled out the cam a little just to see how easy it'd come out. And I saw that first lobe and it struck on my head. This is a mechanical fuel pump. I've got to take the fuel pump out for that push rod to drop out of there before I can take the cam out. I still got to move the radiator, but I was just pulling on it to see how good it'd come out. And as soon as I saw that lobe, I was like, oh yeah, this one's a mechanical fuel pump. So that fuel pump's got to come out right there. Alright, so I had to switch cameras. The phone died on me, but yeah, it's just I rotated the radiator out of the way, and then just slowly pulled the cam out. When you pull it, it falls out of the cam bearings, and then you got to line all them cam bearings up again, then pull it a little bit more. But you shouldn't have to force it. You just line it up, pull a little, line it up. If you start trying to force that thing through there, you're gonna knock your cam bearings out. But you just pull it a little, it'll get stuck. You wiggle it around till the cam bearings line up, pull it a little bit more. It'll come through the cam bearings again, then just keep doing that until it comes all the way out. All the way out. So here's the cam card. Not sure how good y'all can see that on the GoPro, but it's a 248 at 50 thousandths on intake, 260 at 50 thousand. It's exhaust, 112 lobe separation, 597 lift on both the intake and exhaust, and the lobe separation is 112 plus 5. So what I was doing was just matching everything up, make sure that it is in fact for a retrofit roller, and everything looks good. I got the pins both up, the lobes are there, The lobes are wider on the old cam, which is odd. They're a lot sharper on this one, which is weird. But yeah, here's the new cam, and as you can see, this one's a really small base circle. This one, not so much. This one's a really small base circle. So we're going to lube this one up real good. Lube it up real good and stab it back in. Distributor gear. Look good? Yeah, let's lube this one and stick it back in. Stick it in. Alright, and that's going to do it for a small block Chevy cam removal, retrofit roller cam. And we're going to put the nitrous cam in it, and I'll make some more videos of that. And like and subscribe, and y'all have a great day.